What happens when a movie is so intense, so raw, and so daring that entire governments try to erase it from history? Some of these films weren't just controversial, they were outright banned. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the 15 most brutal exploitation movies of the 1960s that faced the ultimate punishment, banishment. How far did these filmmakers go, and why are we still talking about them decades later? Buckle up. You're about to discover the hidden history of cinema's most dangerous decade. Blood Feast, 1963. Every revolution starts somewhere. And for splatter cinema, it was Blood Feast. Herschel Gordon Lewis wasn't trying to win Oscars. He was trying to get people talking, fainting, or running out of the theater. The story is barely there. A wild-eyed caterer, apparently under the spell of a forgotten goddess, sets about preparing a feast that most definitely would not pass modern health codes. What Blood Feast did have in buckets was color. Bright, sticky, impossible to ignore red, paired with DIY effects that made viewers wonder if they should call the authorities. Tongues disappeared, arms and legs ended up where they shouldn't, and the whole thing was shot on a shoestring in sun-blasted Florida. Critics didn't know what to do with it. Audiences, though, lined up in drive-ins, especially when word got around that barf bags were being handed out as souvenirs. It was banned outright, or heavily censored in several countries. But Blood Feast opened the floodgates for low-budget horror and taught filmmakers one essential lesson. If you can't go big, go for the jugular. The Satist, 1963. Some films thrive on atmosphere, others on shock, but The Satist chose pure, raw aggression. Directed by James Landis, this black-and-white sun-baked nightmare put viewers in a junkyard with a gun-toting lunatic modeled after a real-life criminal. 3 school teachers stumble into his lair, and the result is a slow-motion car crash of dread, suspense, and brutality. Arch Hall Jr. ditched his musical comedy background for this chilling role, and the effect is as unsettling as any monster mask. Shot with almost documentary grit by a then-unknown Vilmos Zsigmond, the film's close-ups and relentless pacing crank up the pressure until you're desperate for it to end. Critics turned up their noses, but genre fans recognized it as a blueprint for a new kind of American terror, one that would inspire countless slasher and home invasion films. It didn't rely on elaborate tricks or haunted houses, just one madman, a handful of innocents, and a world with nowhere to run. Not surprisingly, it got pulled from some theaters and courted controversy for its cold-blooded approach. Today, it stands as an early warning shot for where horror was heading. The Touch of Her Flesh, 1967. Few exploitation films are as personal or as unhinged as Michael Finley's The Touch of Her Flesh. This one's a fever dream about revenge, betrayal, and obsession. After a tragic accident caused by his unfaithful spouse, a weapons dealer is left blinded, bitter, and spiraling into madness. What follows is a rampage through New York's seedy side, with Findley himself playing the tormented anti-hero and his real-life partner as the object of his scorn. The murders are staged with mannequins, dim lights, and a kind of clumsy bravado that only makes the violence more unnerving. Findley's direction is raw, almost anarchic, and critics called it gutter trash, while audiences packed into grindhouses to see just how far it would go. The film's success spawned 2 even wilder sequels, forming a cult trilogy that reveled in breaking every taboo it could. At a time when the old studio system was crumbling and rules were up for grabs, Findley proved you could turn outrage into ticket sales. The Flesh trilogy didn't just push buttons, it hit them with a hammer. Olga's House of Shame, 1964. If you want a crash course in why women in prison movies became a thing, look no further than Olga's House of Shame. The third entry in the infamous Olga series, it's a black-and-white plunge into cruelty, control, and cold-blooded authority. Audrey Campbell plays Olga, the warden with a heart of stone, whose preferred method of discipline includes humiliation and manipulation. Shot with a gritty documentary feel, the film is more about intimidation and power than plot. At a time when most films skirted around anything controversial, Olga's House of Shame bludgeoned its way into notoriety, drawing the ire of censors in several American cities. That didn't stop it from becoming a sensation among certain audiences, and the Olga character herself became a strange sort of cult icon, influencing later genre films and even seeping into underground culture. While mainstream critics panned it, those looking for something outside the rules saw it as a rebellious statement against polished Hollywood productions, a flag planted firmly in the land of the forbidden. The Thrill Killers, 1964. Ray Dennis Steckler was the king of low-budget chaos, and The Thrill Killers is his crowning achievement in mayhem. Imagine a city terrorized by escaped psychiatric patients, each one a time bomb, each one desperate to leave their mark. Steckler himself stares, as Cash Flag because why not, and turns Los Angeles into a playground for unfiltered violence and randomness. Scenes were shot guerrilla style, sometimes with real bystanders caught in the frame, and the editing lurches from one madcap scenario to the next. At the time, mainstream critics dismissed it as amateurish or incoherent, but for those in the know, it was proto-slasher gold. The unpredictable pacing, the rough around the edges cinematography, and the genuine feeling of danger. These ingredients helped cement the film's cult status. Some even call it a precursor to the slasher craze that would explode a decade later. Bans and complaints followed, but the film's legend only grew, proving that you don't need millions to scare the pants off an audience. Just a wild idea and the guts to shoot fast and loose. Scum of the Earth, 1963. Before Blood Feast, Herschel Gordon Lewis dipped his toes into another controversial pond with Scum of the Earth. Rather than splatter, this one trafficked in what became known as Roughy, grim tales of manipulation, downfall, and psychological menace. The story is deceptively simple. A young woman, looking for a quick buck, gets pulled into the world of illicit photography, and from there things get dark fast. Framed as a cautionary tale, but obviously designed to bait censors and spark outrage, Scum of the Earth rode the line between morality play and exploitation. Lewis's style was raw, using documentary-like visuals and quick shooting to create a feeling of authenticity. The production code was still limping along, but this film, and others like it, made it clear the old rules were being tested. Critics called it tasteless, but the film's impact was huge, paving the way for a new kind of cinema that reveled in discomfort, blurred lines, and the challenge of getting something shocking past the authorities. Mudhoney, 1965. Russ Meyer was no stranger to controversy, but with Mudhoney, he aimed for something both sleazy and epic. Set in a rural town falling apart under the weight of corruption, religious fanaticism, and unchecked desire, the film throws together a cast of drifters, hypocrites, and schemers. Meyer financed the film himself, pouring all his frustration with sanitized Hollywood into a project that was equal parts Southern Gothic, crime thriller, and over-the-top melodrama. Critics were stumped. Was it a savage satire, a dirt-stained epic, or just trash with delusions of grandeur? Commercially, the film struggled at first, but its reputation grew in underground circles, where its willingness to poke at every taboo earned it cult status. The themes of moral rot and hypocrisy were a slap in the face to mainstream sensibilities. If you wanted a safe, comforting vision of rural America, Mudhoney was not it. Meyer's legacy as an outlaw filmmaker was solidified here, showing that pushing boundaries wasn't just about thrills, it was about tearing down the walls of acceptable cinema. Something Weird, 1967. Something Weird isn't just a title, it's a warning. Herschel Gordon Lewis, never content with a single genre, unleashed this psychedelic blend of horror, crime, and government paranoia, just as the summer of love was cresting. The plot, what little there is, mashes together a disfigured psychic, a seductive witch, shadowy agencies, and a parade of hallucinations. Lewis leaned into the confusion, using garish filters, strobe effects, and abrupt edits to mimic the feeling of a very bad trip. Reviewers were bewildered, sometimes angry, but cult audiences lapped it up. For a country teetering on the edge between old-fashioned respectability and new counterculture, Something Weird felt like a dare. How much madness could you handle in 90 minutes? While bigger studios avoided drug themes, Lewis went straight for the jugular, laying early groundwork for the acid horror niche that would explode later. It's not about coherence, it's about nerve, attitude, and making the audience wonder what on earth they just witnessed. The Wild World of Jane Mansfield, 1968. There's Exploitation, and then there's What Happened to Jane Mansfield. Originally intended as a globe-trotting look at changing attitudes, The Wild World of Jane Mansfield was reworked after the star's tragic car accident. What hit screens was a patchwork of news footage, travelogue, and every racy performance Mansfield ever gave. With her pre-recorded narration stitched in alongside tabloid headlines and even funeral coverage, the film became a posthumous spectacle, a fever dream of fame, loss, and scandal. Critics called it shameless, even ghoulish, but audiences flocked to see a final glimpse of a legend. The boundary between documentary and exploitation was obliterated. The film became a symbol of Hollywood's endless appetite for both glamour and tragedy. Censors in some countries balked at the film's content and approach, but it became a goldmine on the midnight circuit. Whether you see it as a celebration or a cautionary tale, it's unforgettable, both as an artifact of 60s excess and as a reminder of how quickly celebrity can be repackaged, even after death. The Naked Kiss, 1964. Samuel Fuller never played it safe, and The Naked Kiss is proof. From the opening scene, a woman beating down her abuser and tearing off a wig to reveal her bald scalp, you know you're in for a shock. The story follows Kelly, a former city worker trying to build a new life in a small town, only to discover that darkness and corruption lurk behind the picket fences. Fuller tackled everything: hypocrisy, abuse of power, and a subplot so incendiary that many theaters flat out refused to show the film. With tough dialogue, stark imagery, and a sense that anything could happen, The Naked Kiss was years ahead of its time. Critics were appalled, calling it lurid and unfit for polite audiences, and the UK kept it off screens until 1990. But time has been kind to Fuller's vision. The film is now hailed as a classic of uncompromising cinema, an early example of exploitation that punches above its weight, using shock not just to titillate, but to challenge viewers' sense of comfort and morality. Satan in High Heels, 1962. Slinking onto the screen with a jazz score and a sneer, Satan in High Heels is a prime cut of early 60s urban sleaze. Stacey Kane, a tough-as-nails performer, heads to the city to remake herself, stepping over rivals and manipulating every man and woman in her path. Filmed on location in real New York clubs, the movie drips with authenticity and attitude. Director Gerald Intrator and guitarist Mundell Lowe lend it a noir edge, all smoke-filled rooms and dangerous intentions. What made this film particularly controversial wasn't just the crime and corruption, but its central figure. A woman who refused to be a victim or a damsel, instead calling all the shots. The film's subtle hints at same-gender attraction and power games sent the censors into a tailspin, especially under the Fading Haze Code. Critics didn't know what to make of its gritty empowerment, but it quietly resonated with audiences who saw, maybe for the first time, a different kind of anti-heroine, one as ambitious, complicated, and ruthless as any man. Fuego, 1969. Argentinian director Armando Bo and his fearless muse crafted a storm with Fuego, a film that sparked controversy wherever it played. It hit screens in 1969 with a tale of obsession and uncontrolled longing that burned through the country's conservative norms. The lead's performance was nothing short of explosive. Her wild eyes, restless energy, and sweaty fever dream intensity made her an instant icon. Authorities in Argentina called the film immoral and banned it outright, while censors in Spain, Brazil, and even some US states followed suit. Critics dismissed it as trash, but fans saw something more: a woman owning her desires and refusing to apologize, no matter what the world thought. The film's combination of Catholic guilt, raw emotion, and fearless confrontation made it a lightning rod for controversy. Even after the ban, Fuego continued to smolder underground, a forbidden fire that censors just couldn't put out. Love Camp 7, 1969. If you're talking about the roots of Nazi-sploitation, you can't skip Love Camp 7. Set in a fictional World War II prison, it follows two undercover agents who infiltrate an enemy camp only to face a gauntlet of cruelty and humiliation at the hands of ruthless guards. The film isn't subtle, and its intent to shock is clear from the first reel. Banned in the UK as unacceptable under any circumstances, it also landed on the notorious Video Nasties list in the 1980s, making it a prime target for seizures and underground trading. Critics universally condemned it, but that didn't stop it from spawning imitators and building a legend as one of the most infamous grindhouse titles ever made. What makes Love Camp 7 stand out isn't just its brutality, it's the sense that the filmmakers, in their quest to break every taboo, ended up creating a new subgenre almost by accident. Even now, it's rarely shown except in academic or underground circles, a forbidden relic from an era when shock was an act of rebellion. Vixen, 1968. Before mainstream cinema dared to talk about free love, Russ Meyer was already blowing up the boundaries with Vixen. Set in the Canadian wilderness, the film follows its protagonist, a fearless, independent woman, as she charms, seduces, and scandalizes everyone in her path. Nothing was too taboo for this script, not even family or social norms. The result? Censors raided theaters, declared the film obscene, and in some states, outright banned it. Meyer fought back, arguing that the film had artistic and social value, and, in the end, he managed to win several landmark court cases. Vixen became the first X-rated film to become a massive box office success in the United States, grossing over $7 million, a fortune for the time. The film's brash energy, wild style, and refusal to play by anyone else's rules made it a cultural lightning rod. Audiences loved it. Critics hated it. In the end, its defiance made history, opening the floodgates for a new era of adult-oriented cinema. The Curious Doctor, Hump, 1969. Last but absolutely not least, we have The Curious Doctor, Hump, a film that is equal parts mad science, monster flick, and psychedelic nightmare. Hailing from Argentina, this oddball gem features a deranged scientist conducting bizarre experiments with the aim of prolonging life, using methods that left censors fuming. The US release ramped up the outrageousness even further by adding extra scenes, some shot without the original director's involvement, and patching them in with reckless disregard for continuity. The result is a Frankenstein's monster of a movie, masked henchmen, hypnotized victims, and dialogue so off the wall that it sometimes seems like a parody. Critics savaged it, but the film's reputation only grew over time, proving that in the world of exploitation, coherence is optional, but audacity is essential. Though often banned for its outlandish content, The Curious Dr. Hump became a cult favorite, showing that a true oddity will always find its audience, no matter how hard the censors try to lock it away. Still here? You've just journeyed through the wildest, weirdest, and most notorious films the 1960s ever unleashed. These movies broke the rules, shook the censors, and dared audiences to look twice. Which one shocked you the most? Or do you think one is missing from our list? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this dive into banned cinema, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep cuts from the dark side of film history. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the world of cult movies, the only real crime is not talking about them,